In Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon, an arena description of a major character, Father Dolmayan, describes him as the founder of the school of choral mysticism. Now, this word mysticism immediately got my attention when I first saw it because it's a word with deep connections to real-world religion and philosophy with a ton of interesting history behind it. So let's dive into what mysticism is and hopefully uncover some information on Rubicon's religious practices and traditions. So first off, we should cover the nature of choral in Armored Core 6. Choral is, first and foremost, an energy source. It is used to power weapons, autonomous robots, spaceships, orbital lasers, things like that. It's like crude oil in our own world. It's a naturally occurring substance that can be extracted and sold for a massive profit. Its very nature as a scarce and valuable resource creates conflict on Rubicon the same way that scarce and natural resources are drivers of conflict in our world. There's a myriad of corporations and forces vying for control over it. But coral isn't just space oil. A better comparison within the world of science fiction might be to the substance known as spice in the Dune series by author Frank Herbert. So in that series, spice is this substance that is only found on a single planet, a planet called Arrakis. It basically supercharges human abilities. It enables faster than light travel. It ties this whole galaxy-spanning empire together. The person who controls Arrakis controls the known universe then, because without the spice, trade and communication across this vast emptiness of space would be totally impossible. Spice in these stories also acts as a ceremonial drug with religious significance to the Fremen, who are the native population of Arrakis. It has hallucinogenic properties. It can enable prescience, kind of being able to see into the future. Coral is kind of similar to this. It can also be used as a drug. There are a few weapon descriptions and communication logs you can find throughout the game that attest to its intoxicating nature. There are dosers, right? You fight dosers on Rubicon, these people who are addicted to coral. Some people use it recreationally, like those dosers, but others, including those of the Rubicon Liberation Front, use it for religious and spiritual purposes. So in this sense, it would be appropriate to classify coral as an entheogen. An entheogen is a naturally occurring substance with mind-altering properties that is used for spiritual or religious purposes. Typically, these substances, whatever they are, there's a ton of them, induce a state where a person feels like their ego, their personal individual identity, is dissolving away into something more like a united, shared consciousness or experience of reality. And finally, coral is a person, sort of, kind of. It has a consciousness which expresses itself individually in characters like air, but even air makes it clear that she is only, I think the way she describes it is, she's a single wave in a flow that is much bigger than herself. So coral is an energy source. Coral is a drug that is used for recreational and religious purposes, and it is also conscious. It has a personality, it has personhood in some way, and that is expressed through, again, the character of air. So if coral is used for religious purposes, what kind of religion do the people of Rubicon have? Well, that's where we get to this word mysticism. Mysticism is an umbrella term for a whole collection of thought and practice that spans multiple religions and thousands of years, so it can kind of be hard to pin down with a simple description. But the goal, broadly speaking, of mysticism is a direct, unmediated experience of God or divinity. So some sort of encounter that is just between a person and the divine. There's nothing standing in between them, like a priest or a church or another person. It's a direct experience that changes somebody's life, awakens them to some kind of hidden truth about the universe, things like that, a mystical experience. Sometimes it can look like this ecstatic union where the borders between humanity and divinity just dissolve entirely. You can find ideas like this in the writings of certain Christian mystics, like Teresa of Avila, who was a medieval Spanish nun famous for her visions and writings on mysticism. She kind of likened it to a marriage between humanity and God. Importantly, most practitioners of mysticism, whether you're finding them in Christianity, Judaism, Islam, any of the other world religions that have kind of a mystical strain or segment to them, the practitioners in those parts of that religion would usually downplay the role of intellect or knowledge in attaining some kind of closeness with God. They would say it doesn't matter how much you think, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how good your theology is, how many books you've read, you can't get to God with your thoughts and with your intellect. You can only approach the divine with your feelings and with your actions. So you can embody the will and the nature of God in your actions. We see that a lot in Sufi Islam. Sufis are Islamic mystics, right? There's people who have these sorts of goals of wanting to have that direct experience of God. And for them, it's all about, like, how are we living? How are our actions embodying the will of God? And if our actions embody the will of God, that will bring us closer to God. So it's more about doing certain practices, meditation and prayer, things like that, to prepare yourself for an encounter. And Christian mysticism especially places a big importance on this preparation, with some mystics spending their whole lives in contemplation to try and have just one of these direct experiences of God. And these mystical experiences are these sort of direct contact moments, sort of, that mystics are looking for in any of these religions. It's that closeness. Defining these is notoriously difficult because the nature of mystical experiences is that they are typically on the limit of what language can describe. They sort of mess with an old and primal part of your brain that deals with consciousness and identity and categorization. So that's why people like psychologists and sociologists sometimes have a hard time researching mystics and mystical experiences. People who write about them, though, people who have these firsthand experiences, usually describe it as a sort of unifying feeling. They feel like they're being given special insight into their lives and the nature of life and reality by some sort of outside entity. These sorts of experiences occur all over the world, regardless of somebody's religion or background or the time period that they live in. They are one of the most, if you're looking for like a shared human experience, mystical experiences are actually quite common with human beings. There's something about our brains, our psychology, our societies that hardwire certain people to have these very strange, not unpleasant, but weird religious and mystical experiences. So, the religion of Rubicon, this choral mysticism, it seems like it is a religion that is centered around the ingesting of an entheogen. People are using this choral as a drug, not recreationally, but for spiritual and religious purposes, in order to experience some kind of shared consciousness and a unity with the substance that they are using in the rituals. In this way, it's kind of similar to communion in Christianity. Depending on who you ask, right? If you ask a Catholic what is happening in communion, they will say that, well, that's the actual literal body and blood of God that Christians are ingesting, and God is becoming a part of them. If you ask a Protestant, they'll say it's a symbol. It's not literally the flesh and blood of God. But regardless, it's kind of similar to what we see here on Rubicon, right? They are ingesting this thing that is also the goal of their religion. In doing this, the Rubiconians are hoping to transcend their humanity and achieve some kind of direct experience of something that they consider to be divine, or at least of like the utmost importance. Unity with the choral is the goal. All right, thanks for watching.